Reverend Stephen Boisson, who's not here today, but I look forward to seeing him tomorrow in Red Deer, is a young guy, a beefy guy. His arms are as big as my thighs. They're like hams, although I shouldn't use any swine analogies these days. He's a big guy. He's got tattoos. He's a bruiser. He found God, and he, like many converts, had a zeal about him. He ministered to troubled youth on the streets because he knew all about their lives. He came from them. And as many people who live in that world, he's not a silver-tongued devil. He's not the most diplomatic speaker, but boy, does he speak from the heart. And he chose to write a letter to the editor in the Red Deer Advocate, the paper of record in that city. And the editors decided to run it because they thought it was a legitimate debate. And that's what op-ed pages in newspapers are meant for. And so Stephen Boisson wrote a strong op-ed criticizing gay marriage on the gay agenda. And you know what? I don't care if you agree with him or not. That's not the point. He's a free man. We live in a free country. He was expressing his faith in the only way he knew how. He was shouting it out. And the Red Deer Advocate loved it, and they ran letters pro and con. They were hosting the debate. That's how it's supposed to be. But one busybody, no, not in his case a radical Islam from Pakistan, but a busybody who at the time was a teacher in schools, a teacher who would set up the great gay-straight alliances in schools, a radical activist for gay rights in schools, instead of engaging Stephen Boisson in a debate. No, why bother? That takes some intellectual effort. That takes some time. But more than that, it grants to Stephen Boisson his right, his legitimacy to hold a different point of view. That's not what Darren Lund was about. If you want to have a debate about the place of gay marriage or gay rights, let's have it. But that implies that there are two legitimate points of view. Darren Lund did not believe there were two legitimate points of view. He believed there was his point of view and the illegal point of view. So instead of debating Reverend Stephen Boisson, he went to the Alberta Human Rights Commission with just the same sort of complaint that this radical imam went after me. And the Alberta Human Rights Commission seized the complaint against him. I was let go after 900 days because I know how to make a fuss. I know how to be noisy and blog and get on the radio and talk to politicians and make it bloody tough for the politicians and the bureaucrats, but not Stephen Boisson. He doesn't have a Rolodex with the Prime Minister on it. He doesn't know how to raise 100 grand for legal fees. Stephen Boisson was trapped in this process, this Kafkaesque process. Let me tell you a little bit about the process. If you're charged with a criminal offense and you're too poor to afford a lawyer, you get legal aid. Not so in human rights commissions, even though 90% of people charged are too poor to afford a lawyer. If you're charged with an offense under the criminal code, a policeman cannot just come into your house or office to seize what he wants. He needs a search warrant. You don't need to be a lawyer to know that. You just have to watch Law and Order. You need a search warrant. Not so under the Human Rights Commission, Jerry. I think it's Section 23 that grants human rights officers the right to enter your business, even your home, at any time without a warrant, to take whatever, to take your hard drive, to take your papers. That's why I actually went down to my interrogation. My lawyer said, you don't have to go to them, but they'll come to you. Real criminals, accused murderers, have the right not to be subject to warrantless search and seizure, not mere accused pastors. Oh, by the way, if you're charged with an offense in the Human Rights Commission, who oversees the hearing? If it's in a court, it's a judge, someone learned in law, someone who's taken an oath of neutrality, a nonpartisanship. Judges aren't even allowed to belong to political parties. They have to be so neutral. Not so in human rights commissions, where they're radical activists. No judges, in fact, often not even lawyers. In this province, one of the human rights commissioners is a nurse. Another is a war vet. I like nurses and I like war vets, but I don't want to entrust to them the niceties and the fine points of my constitutional freedoms. Not a real judge, political activists quite often. No disclosure rules, hearsay evidence, no following of precedent. And here's one that really gets me. If you were charged with a criminal offense, if you do not get a speedy trial, you are acquitted by default. In a case called Askov, the Supreme Court let tens of thousands of accused criminals, including many serious criminals, let out of jail free because the government tarried too long, because they were not given their trial in a speedy way. And although it was terrible, you can understand why they did that. You can understand it because to be accused of a crime is such a stigma And to have that held over you for years and years and years because the government is taking its sweet time, you can understand why we want a speedy trial. Because if an innocent man is charged, he needs to be swung through to vindication. And if a charge lies for 1, 2, 3 years, and it's the massive resources of the state that are causing the delay, you can see why that's unfair. Well, how long was Stephen Boisson being ground through this process without legal aid, without a real judge, without protections against warrantless search and seizure, without disclosure, without any of these things? How long? Is it 6 years and counting now, Jerry, or is it 7 yet? Are we at the 7-year anniversary yet? And you know, the process is the punishment. If you're merely tagged with this charge, not only are you denormalized, you're decanadianized, you're immoral, you're the hater. A hater? A hater? For expressing his religious faith, he's a hater now. It's a secular fatwa, this one. The one against me was a Muslim fatwa, but this is a secular atheist fatwa, isn't it? To call someone who merely believes an old book called the Bible a hater? To call him a hater and have the stigma of the state? If Darren Lund, his tormentor, this officious busybody who had nothing to do with it other than he wanted to kick a Christian, if Darren Lund wanted to debate with Stephen Boisson, they could have had the debate, but that wouldn't have marginalized Stephen Boisson. That wouldn't have cost Stephen Boisson a minute of his time or $1 of his money. He could have laughed it off or ignored it. But as John Ross Taylor showed, you cannot ignore this commission, because even if you don't show up and even if you don't abide by it, it will come for you and you'll spend time in jail. So what happened? Well, I was let go in my case, $100,000 lighter. Thank you to the folks in this room who chipped into my legal defense. I appreciate that. A lot of my time was wasted, but you know what? I'm sort of built for fighting. I enjoy it a little bit. And when they came for me, I said, you have the first punch. Yes, sir, you do. I'll have the last. But what if you're a normal person? A normal person who actually has things to do. Stephen Boisson's working today. Can you imagine that? He has to actually hold down a job. He can't be a full-time busybody. Not like Darren Lund at the taxpayers' expense. So what did they do? What did they do to Stephen Boisson, a guy who couldn't raise a media ruckus or a political ruckus to set himself free? They convicted him, of course. And what was the order? What was the order? Well, Darren Lund, the officious busybody, that intermeddler, that troublemaking activist, who himself, he claims, is not gay, but he made the complaint on behalf of the gays, he'll have you know. He actually demanded that Stephen Boisson be forced to pay a fine to EGAL, Canada's national gay rights lobby group. To their eternal credit, when EGAL heard this, they wrote to the commission and said, we will not take that blood money. We remember not too long ago when our own material was censored, caught at the border by nosy customs police. We disagree with every word Stephen Boisson has to say, but we will debate the man. We will not silence him. We will not take his money. We refuse it. Good for them. But not Darren Lund. He said, well, I'll take the money myself, thank you very much. And he did. What was it, $7,000 into his pocket? $5,000 into his pocket. Not bad, $5,000, oh, tax-free. And what was it for? Did Darren Lund get punched in the nose? Was it for, because he had a broken bone? Did he suffer some loss? Did he have some damages? Why did he get $5,000 in tax-free money? Did he suffer pain and suffering as a gay man? No, no. He's an officious busybody, a troublemaker. Our real courts do not allow people to sue without standing, without grounds. This fake court, this kangaroo court, had created a counterfeit human right, the human right not to be offended. You'll find it in no text. You'll find it in no speech given by Mahatma Gandhi or Martin Luther King. There is no such thing as the human right not to be offended. But because Darren Lund's human right not to be offended was offended, he got $5,000 tax-free. Not bad. It's not